Hello and welcome back to the Air Armoury. I'm JRH and today I'm going to be looking at Airgun Darts. So I'm sure you've all seen Airgun Darts before, but you may not have used them or know much about them. So what I'm going to do in this video is briefly explain a bit about their history and purpose to give some context before moving the camera over to the bench to take a closer look at their design and construction, as well as a couple of variations. And then after that I'll do some shooting, including some testing and comparison. Now, since the development of the modern lead pellet, airgun darts have seen a massive decline in popularity. But 100 years ago or so, in the late 19th, early 20th century, they were a staple airgun ammunition and were in widespread use. And the reasons for that were due to cultural and technological reasons. Around that time, shooting was much more common and, dare I say it, a more socially acceptable pastime. So shooting darts at a dartboard from a low-powered airgun was a way that shooting could be enjoyed indoors, for example, as an after-dinner game. In addition to this, at the turn of the century, nearly all air guns were smoothbore spring piston guns, so required a projectile that had little friction in the barrel and was self-stabilising as it wasn't being spun from the rifling. So then, when the modern lead pellet was developed and nearly all air guns started to have rifled barrels, the airgun dart became largely obsolete and therefore faded into relative obscurity. Now, they did experience a slight resurgence from the 1960s onwards with the popularity of pistols such as the Gat gun made by Harrington, and there are still a handful of manufacturers still making airgun darts today, so they are still available. Here are the airgun darts. Now, I was intending to get a real dart out for comparison, but I can't seem to find mine at the moment, but you all know what they look like. Whilst there are some differences, the principle is the same, and that's what makes them stable in the air. So the main body of the dart and the thinner pointed tip are made of metal, usually steel, and then they have a soft tail on the end. Modern darts, like these ones made by Umarex, usually have a synthetic fibre tail, but traditionally they would have been made of natural fibre. I have here an old packet of Sussex Armoury Jackal airgun darts from the late 70s or early 80s, and as you can see they have mohair tufted tails. Mohair being the hair from an Angora goat, and then the tail is either glued or crimped into the back of the dart. Now, as you can see, they're all brightly coloured. Nowadays I suspect that that's probably for aesthetic appeal as much as anything else, but traditionally, like real darts, the different colours were used to identify different shooters' darts. Because they're made of steel, they are very durable, including that pointed tip, which means unlike lead pellets, these are reusable. Now, they're probably not going to last indefinitely, but they are certainly not a single-use ammunition. Another benefit of the pointed tip is that if you're shooting at a dartboard or something like a thin piece of wood, unless you miss your target entirely, there is minimal chance of ricochets, which is what allows them to be used in more confined spaces such as indoors. Downside though of them being made of steel is that they are likely to damage the rifling in a rifled barrel, which is why they can only really be used from a smoothbore gun. Now, in order to reduce friction in the barrel, darts tend to be slightly smaller in diameter than pellets, which makes it easy to seat the darts, and that's quite important as you need to push them down far enough so that the tail is fully in the barrel, so that the tail doesn't get trapped when you close the gun up. There is some difference of opinion as to what difference this makes with regard to sealing the bore, especially in a break barrel rifle. Now, some people say that as the dart is not an airtight fit in the barrel, there isn't a sufficient enough air cushion created, which means that the piston doesn't slow enough to stop it slamming into the end of the compression chamber, therefore potentially causing damage to the spring, piston or piston seal. Others, however, argue that if you're using a low-powered gun, which you ideally are supposed to with darts, the soft tail will flare out enough. Whilst it won't create anywhere near as good seal as with a modern lead pellet, it's still enough to prevent damage to the gun. So these are standard airgun darts. but like with all things, there have been attempts to alter and improve the design over the years. So whilst they're not as common as the regular darts, you can also get these. Now, I've heard of these referred to as a variety of things, including bolts and ballistic darts, but these are basically standard airgun darts, but instead of having a fibre tail, they have moulded plastic fins. And these are supposed to make the projectile more aerodynamically stable, and as well as that, the central plastic part is very slightly wider than the steel part, and that's meant to prevent metal-to-metal contact with the rifling, although you are likely to get unwanted plastic fouling in the barrel instead. So with regard to size and weight, darts were traditionally made in a variety of calibers, including some larger ones. I've read up to and around 40 caliber, but modern darts pretty much only come in 177 or 22, as there's no real need for them in any other calibers anymore. All of my darts I have here, though, of both types, are in 22, as the only gun that I've got that I'm willing to shoot them from is in 22. Now, their length from point to tail is 32.2mm, compared to just 7.6mm for an average airgun pellet in the same caliber. These ones are Air Arms Diablo Field in 22. Now, the darts weigh 21.2 grain, so they are significantly heavier than regular pellets. These Air Arms ones are 16 grain, which is about average for a 2.2 pellet, and in fact the plastic finned darts are even heavier at 26 grains. As darts are now generally only used for plinking or just a bit of fun, they're mass produced and shot straight from the packet, but back in the day there was a fine art to making these, and shooters that used them competitively would go to great lengths to customise them in order to improve their performance, including strategically trimming or plucking the tails until they were as aerodynamic as possible and they flew consistently each time. And people also used to darken one of the tail fibres so that they knew which way to load it in the gun each time they fired it. I will be having a proper round of darts using an actual dartboard in a minute, but before I do that, I have some dartboard paper targets. I'm going to stick a couple of those to a piece of wood to compare the regular darts and the plastic finned ones, which will also give me a chance to see where I need to hold on the target. Now, darts are definitely not designed as a long-range ammunition, so I'm going to be shooting at the regulation distance in a normal game of darts, which is just 7 foot 9 1/4 inches. I'm going to be using my SMK XS 1918 break barrel rifle. Now, this gun does have a rifled barrel, but it's not in very good condition, so I'm not too bothered about damaging it further, and it's got a power of only around 4.3 foot-pounds, so I'm hoping that's going to be a low enough power for the darts. Now, I've got two of those dartboard targets set up next to each other. The left-hand one, I'm first going to put 3 regular darts on, and then the right-hand one, I'm going to put 3 plastic fin darts on. And now the plastic finned ones. Here are my 2 targets. Even at such a short distance, the weight of the darts did cause them to drop, which I had expected, so I held on the double 20 up here. The heavier plastic finned ones obviously drop slightly more than on the fibre tail ones here, and whilst neither of them are a very tight grouping, it's probably good enough to hit roughly what I'm aiming at on a full-size dartboard, which is what I'm going to do now. So this is a voiceover I'm putting on afterwards. Now, I started on 501, like in a normal game of darts. In some games you have to throw a double to begin, but that could have meant I was there for hours, so I decided to go straight for the treble 20. As you can see though, I only ended up getting a score of 3 rather than the 60 I was after, but that one dart is all it took for me to realise that this was a massive mistake, as the dart went in far too far and started to wreck my dartboard. As you can see from this clip of me having to remove it with pliers, and the cavern it left in the board. I think the problem there was that the gun was probably a bit too powerful still, and in all honesty I was probably a bit too close, which meant it was a less than successful test. Now if you're interested in trying airgun darts for yourself, they are still available with a few companies making them, including Umarex and Milbro, and they cost around £3 for 10, so they're by no means cheap. They are quite good fun, albeit really as a novelty now more than anything else, so I very rarely shoot them. The fact that they're reusable does mitigate the price very slightly, and as they don't generally cause ricochets, they can be used indoors, but on the other hand there's really no use for them anymore. They are quite expensive and they are likely to damage most modern guns. So thanks for watching, I hope you found the video interesting. If so, be sure to like, comment and subscribe to the Air Armoury, and until next time, keep your arms in the air.